Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Now, I get a lot of questions from you guys, so now and again I like to do a questions and answers video with some of the questions that I think will be most useful for people. So without further ado, let's dive in. So the first question is, what are your thoughts about food planning? I don't see how to incorporate this with intuitive eating. What if I don't feel like eating what I've planned? One of the things with intuitive eating is about asking yourself what you want to eat and to try and become more internally regulated about your food choices. So for a lot of people, it feels like that should look like making food decisions on the fly. So for me, I used to live near a supermarket when I was going through my binge eating and figuring out which parts of intuitive eating were going to work for me. And I remember thinking, well, I don't need to have food in because I've got this big store on my doorstep, so I can just ask myself, what do I fancy? And I'm going to like smash this intuitive eating thing because I've got so much choice. But actually, a lot of choice doesn't necessarily serve us. So it could be quite overwhelming when I was feeling a bit stressed and confused, and there was just so much to negotiate with when there are so many options. I think food planning can be really helpful when used flexibly. So for me, I had many days where I would wake up and I had no idea what I was going to eat all day. And I found those to be the hardest days and the days that I was more likely to become derailed and to binge. On the flip side, I'm one of those people that sometimes, like even a food plan, even a generous food plan can feel a bit restrictive. Like there's a rebel in me that kind of wants to go, no, I want to eat what I want. I don't want to eat what I plan to eat. It almost feels like a restriction in and of itself, just a psychological one. So for me, I never wrote down food plans, but I had to start making some decisions ahead of time in order to support my recovery. I had to have some idea of what I was going to eat for lunch or dinner. Now that might be between a couple of options, but the thing is, when you have to negotiate with food several times a day, and food is a source of anxiety and stress for you, that can be quite challenging. I think it's helpful to have options, but sometimes having too many options just doesn't work. And also, occasionally in life we have to eat things that we don't really feel like eating. There aren't always all the options. So there is something, I think, even in like learning how to have a healthy relationship with food, to sometimes tolerate having a meal that might not have been quite what you fancied. I mean, ideally we want to maximize satisfaction because satisfaction has a moderating and balancing effect with food. But we also have to be able to tolerate sometimes feeling unsatisfied. Because for a while, like in my semi-recovered state, whenever I felt unsatisfied with food, it was really triggering. And I'd want to binge. Binging wouldn't satisfy it. So it was just not a helpful way of measuring it. But it's important to be checking in with yourself. If you're not feeling satisfied, it can also be because you're not eating enough. Or it can be that you just didn't particularly enjoy your food. So like anything, use food planning in a way that works for you. Just have some idea. Just try and reduce the number of food decisions that you have to make each day. I think that tends to benefit most people. So, question number 2. I'm stuck in the loop of One-Last-Binge. I keep swearing this will be the last one, but then I just do it again. Do you have any advice about how to get unstuck? I think a lot of people can relate to this. That's why I chose this question. How many times have you said to yourself, this is the last time, tomorrow I'm not going to do this? I was stuck in that for a long time. Because the thing is, I really believed it as well. Each time I said it, I really believed it, like one last time, and then tomorrow I'm just not going to do it. And then so I have this question which really shifted everything for me, and I cannot remember if I heard this question somewhere or whether it came from me. I really don't know. So I feel like it came from me, but I don't want to take credit if it was somebody else who put this question out there into the world. And this question is simply this: what makes you believe that you're going to be able to do tomorrow what you're struggling to do today? That is so challenging. When you ask yourself that question in the moment, when you're in the middle of a binge urge and you're trying to convince yourself it's going to be one last time, how do you know? We have these minds that seem to be capable of convincing us of anything. Human beings are really good at justifying their behaviour. We can behave in all kinds of absurd, irrational ways, and we will find a reason for it. We will create a story around it. And the mind just seems to do this. Like, the urge feels so primal and so strong that the mind has to find a way to justify having the binge. So this is what it does. But what that then does is it erodes our sense of self-trust, because it feels like we just keep letting ourselves down over and over again. I did a video, it's not one I think that's watched that much, but I think it's one of my favourite videos I've done. And it's about taking responsibility. I'll link to it above. And I think maybe people don't tend to click on this video because they're afraid it's going to be like, you're not taking responsibility for your binge eating and you need to buck up your ideas and that people are going to feel ashamed. It's not. I'm all about the self-compassion. But people who struggle with binge eating have an issue with responsibility. And it's not that you don't take responsibility, it's that you take too much and you take it in the wrong places. So you beat yourself up and you feel guilty and awful for what you've already eaten in the past. The past is no longer your responsibility. The past is gone. It cannot be changed. Everything you have ever put in your mouth up to this point is out of your control now. It can't be changed. And then to try and tolerate those feelings of like disgust and guilt and shame, you make these grand plans for tomorrow and for the rest of your life about how things are going to be different. You set your expectations up here, and quite often it's not realistic. It's like in the moment you become convinced that you can just decide to be different, and from tomorrow you're going to be different. And it's like you have to do that in order to feel okay now. But now you're trying to take responsibility for something that doesn't even exist yet. And yet the one time where the responsibility is yours, and by responsibility, ability to respond, not this kind of burdensome idea of responsibility, is in the here and now. I once heard it, and I'm not sure what I think of it, but I once heard it said like this, like, your only job is to not binge now. That's it. Because if you don't binge now, you won't binge. And the mind wants to jump to the future. Well, what if? And this kind of... And I'm not quite sure what I think of it. I think it has some merit. It feels a little bit... I don't know. There's something about it that doesn't quite sit right with me, and I'm not quite sure what it is. But the sentiment is about now. So I've also done some videos about what to do after you binge to reset. But I think when you're trying to reset after a binge, don't frame it as in what you're going to do tomorrow. It starts now, in this moment. So even if it's 9 p.m. and you're going to go to bed, whatever your intention is, whatever it is that you're saying you're going to do to try and take care of yourself, it starts straight away. So one of mine, I've shared this before, would be to reset after a binge, would be like, okay, tomorrow I can eat whatever I want. The only condition is that I have to actually experience eating it and do my utmost to enjoy it. Because if I did that, I wouldn't binge. So rather than saying, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow, it's like, this starts now. You've already started, even if you haven't interacted with food yet. Does that make sense? Rather than making it this future thing you're going to do, it starts now. You have begun, because now is the only time we have. Life is one long now. So if you're stuck in that tomorrow I'm going to, there's something about being able to gently call yourself out. And this has to be done gently because there's so much shame around this stuff. And if we fall into a shame hole, we will just either feel like we're going to collapse, or we'll defend against it, and the mind will have to come up with stories about why this really is going to be the last time. So question number 3. I'm feeling pretty hopeless. Is it ever possible to lose weight after recovering from binge eating? Did you lose weight in your recovery? So if you've been following me for a while, you might have noticed I don't talk about my weight changes in numbers. My weight has gone up and down throughout my life and throughout my eating disorder, but I think to actually share what those numbers are, there might be some people that resonate with that, and for others they might not resonate. And also there's this, it then sets up this expectation that this is what is supposed to happen with your body, and all our bodies are different. There is this idea around set point theory that our bodies have this set point that it's most comfortable at, So if we're eating, quote unquote, normally, whatever that is, that our bodies will find their way back to that set point weight. It's important to note though that set point, it is a theory. It often gets talked about like it's a fact. And it hasn't actually been proved. It seems to make some sense though when we see what happens with people who lose and gain weight. The thing is, when you are wanting to recover and your reason for recovering is all about weight, even if you put weight on the back burner, there's a sense of like, if you don't get this weight loss that you want, that somehow, you've been cheated and all this work was for nothing. And that can be really derailing. I see people getting derailed by this all the time with their expectations of what their weight should be doing, usually going down, is what they're expecting, I mean. But there are so many other benefits as well to recovering from binge eating, like so many. Just in terms of how you feel and how you feel about yourself and not being controlled by food anymore. Feeling free, having better energy, feeling more engaged in life. There are so many other real advantages, yet the hook on weight loss that so many of us find ourselves hooked on, is there, and can somehow, like when you're hyper focused on that, all the other benefits seem to fall away. And if the weight loss doesn't come, like the brain will sometimes go, well, like, what's the point? What's the point in trying to do all this work when it's so hard? Struggling with binge eating is hard. It really is. It's not an easy thing. I probably don't need to tell you this, but it's not an easy thing. It's not the easy way out. And recovery is uncomfortable as well, but it's so worth it. So I cannot say what your body's going to do. Do I believe it's possible for people to lose weight after they stop binge eating? I think it's possible for some people to lose weight after they stop binge eating. I can't make sweeping statements about everybody. So I don't know. I don't know your situation and I don't know your body. And I don't know what you've been through as well, because weight cycling can really impact like how the body responds to holding on to and releasing weight. Anyway, the next question. I struggle with bulimia, not binge eating. Is it possible to follow your advice for binge eating and using it to recover from bulimia? That is a great question. So some of you might know I struggled with bulimia for about 4 or 5 years, and then there was binge eating either side of that. So I know what it's like. I have been there. What often happens with people who struggle with bulimia and how they view recovery? They tend to want to recover from bulimia by stopping the binge eating, because they figure, well, if I'm not binging, then I won't purge. So this is where I need to break the cycle. I need to not binge. And actually what tends to happen for most people who go through binge eating recovery is that the purging needs to stop first. And I haven't talked a lot about purging, so maybe it's something that I should do a video on. Let me know if you want one. I don't know how many people who watch my stuff do struggle with bulimia. But purging, it's so disruptive. Like, it disrupts you hormonally, it disrupts you at the neurological level. It confuses the brain in terms of like the nutrients you're eating and then you're removing food. So it actually sets you up for the next binge. We know that restriction or restrictive thinking plays into binge eating anyway. Well, it's a form of restriction. So as long as the purging behaviors continue, for a lot of people, the binging won't reduce. So there are certain techniques that are done in bulimia treatment around delaying the purge, being able to tolerate it, because normally if somebody is bulimic, they will binge and they will want to get rid of the food as fast as they can. And there is such an addictive nature to purging. Doesn't sound like it, right? Because it doesn't sound like a very pleasant thing to do at all, and it's not pleasant to do, but there's a relief that comes in. It stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, it releases endorphins, and it can create this sense of calmness after binge eating. Most people who struggle with disordered eating, there is a hyper focus on weight and body image. For someone with bulimia, that tends to be even more heightened. So the idea of giving up purging before giving up binging is terrifying. It's what keeps people stuck. And it wasn't until I reached a point where I was in so much pain that I was willing to prioritize my mental and my emotional health over how my body looked. because it just got to a point where that seemed like the only way out. And it was the only way out for me. I do think there's a lot of things that I talk about around body image, around binge urges, around a lot of the mentality that comes around binging, I think is relatable to people with bulimia. And I do have people who have bulimia write to me and say that it's helpful. So I would imagine that there are things that you can get from my videos about that, but there really is something about tackling the purge first when it comes to bulimia recovery. I hope that was helpful. I hope there was something in there that was interesting for you. If you have any questions, you can always contact me. Please do check out my podcast, Life After Diets with Stephanie Michelle. We're having a lot of fun doing that and answering a lot of people's questions within the podcast as well. So, thank you for being here. I will see you on the next video.